Hi, and welcome to MedCamps. My name's Tway. I'm a fourth year medical student at Lancaster University, and I'm the founder of MedCamps. Usually we do podcasts and bit of teaching during our podcasts, but today I'm going to be filming an ultimate MMI interview guide that should have everything you need to know for your MMI interviews. Before I jump straight in, let me just give you a quick warning and shamelessly plug myself in the process. The warning is this: don't go and buy any information packs or any textbooks on MMI interviews or any of that kind of thing that's sold by other companies, because this video series will have everything you need to know. In this video series will be ethics that I've taken from medical school level, condensed it and simplified it and delivered it to you. So you won't only just know the 4 pillars of medical ethics, which is what a lot of other YouTube videos talk about. I'll take you a step further so you can shine, right? Because at the end of the day, you are competing against everyone else in the interview. But that's why we need to push you a bit further than just the 4 pillars. So we don't gatekeep any information. We'll give it all to you for free in this video series. But if you do decide to use us for anything, please only just use us for the mock interviews. The only thing we charge for is our time. So if I spend an hour with you, that's what I'll charge you for. But other than that, I won't charge you for any information. It will all be for free. So let's get started. In all of the videos of this series, including this one, there will be many timestamps, so you can just jump to the part you want. I don't want to take up your time with fluffiness, and this is the only time I'll be talking about something other than mock interviews, because this is the intro video and I want you to get a gist of what's going to be talked about today. But we'll get started with what I call the pyramid of importance. Now, that will become somewhere here on the screen, I believe, but at the bottom, you've got interview etiquette, understanding MMI structure, and practical tips for confidence. This is really the building blocks. So you can't have the top levels of the pyramid without the further bottom levels, right? We need to start with really getting yourself prepared for the interview. If you're doing a face-to-face interview, you need to learn the etiquette for a face-to-face medical school interview, and you need to understand exactly what you'll be encountering. Say you're doing an MMI interview or a panel interview. They're pretty much the same thing in terms of the content delivery, so what you're saying in your answer. The only difference is how you manage your time and what things you might want to delve into. So with a panel interview, that is maybe 1 or 2 people assessing you, and you go in and you've got 15 minutes, maybe less, maybe more. It varies a lot between different universities. And they'll give you free reign over your time to answer a question. And they'll ask you a series of questions during that panel interview. This series is going to be mainly about MMI interviews, because the majority of medical schools in the UK do MMI interviews, and they can be the bottleneck to entrance for some of these medical schools. Medical schools like Plymouth can have quite tight bottlenecks at the MMI interview stage. With an MMI interview, you've got roughly 7 to 14 interview stations, and a station is where there'll be 1 person sat or 2 people, depending on what type of station it is, and you'll go in and you'll have 5 minutes to answer whatever that station is asking you, or to perform the task that is asked of you. So this could be, breaking bad news to a patient. All right, and we'll go through all of these types of stations in this video series. The amount of stations you have varies. So certain medical schools will do 10, certain medical schools like Lancaster, where I'm at, will do 14, and some will do 7. So it can vary a lot. And the time that they give you for each station can vary too. So sometimes they can give you 5 minutes per station, sometimes they can give you 10. 10 is very rare, but sometimes they'll give you 5 minutes, but in the station there'll be a 2-part question. So you pretty much have half the time, so 2.5 minutes per question. Other than the 5 minutes, you've got a minute either side usually, or some time either side, to read the task. So you'll reach the entrance or the door, whatever, there'll be the task on a paper. You flip it over, read it, they'll give you a minute to think about the task, and then they'll let you go in, answer 5 minutes, then you spend a minute going to the next, or 30 seconds going to the next station. And that 30 seconds lets the interviewer just mark your performance in that interview you've just done. So that's the structure. And some of these stations might be rest stations as well. So make sure to use your rest stations wisely. Actually rest, relax, just until your next station. Imagine you're just waiting for a bus. Don't think about the previous station. And that leads me on to the next point, which is if you've done bad in a previous station, don't dwell on it, right? Just because you've messed up your previous station doesn't mean you need to mess up your next one. Leave that self-doubt for after the interview. Don't be having self-doubt during the interview. Now, the next part of the pyramid is types of stations and preparing for them. So you need to prepare for each different type of station that you can get in your MMI interview, because they will fall within these types of stations. And if you know what it is they're roughly testing with their question, you know how to tailor your answer. And that means you'll gather as many marks as possible. We're going to be talking about the types of stations in a minute. I'm just going to go through the rest of the building blocks to the pyramid. So the next part is practice, practice, practice. This is the most important part. And if you've only got the first two blocks of the pyramid, you're not going to be able to get massively high marks because you do need to practice. Practice can be with friends, it can be with family. You can do it on your own, although it's difficult on your own. Or if you want an expert to guide you, like I said in the intro, we are here. Just check out our website and see what you like. And if you want me specifically to do your mock interview, just send us a message beforehand before you buy anything, because I can be quite busy. So just send a message and I'll see when I'm free, and hopefully we can do something together. Okay, so, and the last one, the tip of the pyramid, and I put it as the tip of the pyramid because it's not essential, but it can help you in certain cases. And that is specific uni prep. So what specific university you're applying to might ask you questions such as, for example, let's say you apply to Manchester. They might say, why did you choose Manchester specifically? So then you've got to have an answer prepared as to why the medical school, why the area of Manchester, and relate that both to yourself as like your personality and your hobbies and interests, but also as a kind of future interest of why this area, where do you think you would like to work, things like that. They want ideally you to be able to survive for 5 years, so that's why they ask you, or 6 years, that's why they ask you why Manchester or why this medical school. And we'll talk about that as well. That'll be a future video in this video series. Now that we've talked about the pyramid of importance, let's move on to what you need to prepare before you watch all these videos. Now, I've got a bit of homework for you, and it's not long, don't worry. You just need to prepare a quick template, or a diary, as I like to call it. And the diary will have the following, it will be like a table, right? It's not really a diary, it's more of a table that you need to fill out. So the first part of the table will be the concept that you're talking about. Now the concept I mean is like empathy, compassion, teamwork, communication, these kind of areas, right? So, and then I want you to fill out where you showed that specific attribute. So where did you show communication on work experience or at school or outside in extracurricular activities? Where did you show empathy? Where did you show teamwork? These kind of things. Then I want you to go on and talk about how can you relate that to medicine as a whole? So you might say the teamwork is related to medicine because a lot of treatments for certain conditions, such as cystic fibrosis in children, requires a multidisciplinary team approach, an MDT approach. This requires many people of different disciplines treating that one singular patient, and there will be a lot of teamwork involved in developing a management plan for that patient. And that's why teamwork is important, right? This is a really, really generic answer. Most of you already know it. So that's what I kind of mean is related to medicine, and related to medicine in a way of being a doctor, right? Being a doctor. Then I want you to do one step further that I haven't seen many YouTube videos mention, but is really important, is I want you to then relate that experience and that attribute that you've shown in your experience to being a medical student, right? So say you're applying to a university that does PBL or CBL or any group projects. You can then say, this aspect of teamwork is super important because when I'm going to be doing PBL as a medical student, you need to be able to keep the team morale up. And if people are stuck on something, you need to be able to navigate that, for example. So that's just going to make you shine a bit more because remember, they're trying to see if you can survive the 5 years. They don't want to, they're not interviewing you to become a doctor just yet. They're interviewing you to become a medical student. Then there's 5 or 6 years of medical student phase, and then there's doctor. So Yeah, you have to talk about how much you want to be a doctor, but you also have to sell the fact that you want to be a medical student. So that's what that column is there for. The column after that, so you've related it to being a doctor, you've related it to being a medical student, you've talked about the concept itself, empathy, teamwork, whatever it may be. Then I want you to start talking about the converse, or I want you to do the same process again for the converse. So imagine you've done a good attribute of teamwork. So a time you were in a team and it was successful. You've done that whole process for that, right? I want you to do it again, but in a time where you're in a team and it was unsuccessful. Because what this will show is that you can learn from your mistakes. And they might ask you questions like this. It's not always going to be, give me a time you did something really good in a team. The question might be, give me a time you were in a team and it was unsuccessful. And what did you learn from that? That's why you have to prepare this diary for that kind of questioning. And as you go through the videos and the types of stations that I talk about, you will see that, oh, hold on a second. I did something kind of similar in school where I could talk about this kind of attribute, or I could answer this question. Then plan out the question using that table. And what I'll do is I'll put a template table just to my left here, and you can have a look at it. You can use that table as well. And then, yeah, fill it out for yourself or recreate it and fill it out. Add columns in, change it around however you like. Just make sure it's a table where you can prepare questions and you can have a bank of things to draw on whenever you need to, because it's really difficult to wing the interview completely. I understand that you need to be free thinking for a lot of the questions that the medical schools give you. They won't use cookie cutter questions, but it is important to have some sort of preparation before you go into them. Okay, so that's the work experience diary. Prepare that diary either before you watch the videos or whilst you're going through the videos. I'd recommend whilst you're going through the videos, and I'll make references throughout all of the separate videos to say, hey, you might want to put this in your diary and prepare an answer for this. And whenever I say you might want to prepare an answer for it, that's what I mean, is go to your table or your diary and write something in that's specific to you and tailor it to yourself. So now we're going to move on to the types of MMI stations you can get. And the types of MMI stations you can get vary a lot, and sometimes something you prepare for hours on end, for nights in a week, might not even come up. So it's becoming more and more popular in medical schools now for ethics to just not come up. Sometimes ethics just won't come up in your interview. But if it does come up, it's one of those things that you can really prepare yourself for. And if it does come up, that's what I hope this video series will make you shine compared to other people who haven't watched it. Because I'm going to take it a step further and talk about ethics at a higher level than just 4 pillars of medical ethics. Right, so the types of MMI stations are as follows. You can get an instruction giving station where you pretty much have to instruct someone to do a task. It might be building a Lego structure. It might be tying their shoelaces. But you have to do it verbally with no hand gestures at all. So that tests your patience, it tests your communication skills, and it tests your reassurance skills as well. Say they mess up, you have to reassure them and keep them going. Much more detail. For these types of MMI stations, I will put the link of the specific video talking about that type of MMI station in the description, and then you can refer to that specific type of MMI station if you want to. So you can use this video as a kind of content list, so you can just keep jumping to the type of stations you need work on. The next type of station is a personal statement station, and this is where they'll have your personal statement in front of them and they'll ask you questions about it. Yeah, and it rarely happens, but it can. The next type of station are motivation stations, and in these motivation stations they might ask questions like why medicine, the really popular one, or they might ask questions, which is another popular one, similar to why medicine and why not nursing. And the reason this is really popular is because you need to say something that attracts you to medicine and not nursing, and there has to be something that isn't part of the nursing role and is part of the medicine role. And it can't be things like I want the power or I want the money. There is no money anyway, but I want the money. So you can't say anything like that. That'll instant fail. The next type of station you can get is a work experience station, and here simply they'll just ask you questions about your work experience, and the examples you come back with, you need to be able to show that you've learned from those examples and you've put them into action yourself in the future. And I'll talk about that when we get to that video. The next really big topic, the next type of station is the medical ethics type of stations. Now, you have to prepare yourself for these. There's just no way around it. You can't wing these. Having a structure is the best way to attack these type of stations. And if you have a structure and you work through your structure, you'll guarantee yourself all the marks in that station. And then there's very unique ways you can make your answer a bit more personal and a bit more fluid. And the things that we'll cover in that video, it might have to be split into 2 videos purely because of its length, is the 4 pillars of medical ethics and schools of moral thought. The GMC domains, there's 4 GMC domains that you need to be aware of. Capacity, and specifically the Mental Capacity Act of 2005. Consent, and the 4 things that make consent valid, and I've got a great mnemonic for that. And if you want to find out the mnemonic, go check the description, and next to the consent part of the description there'll be a video link, and I'll talk about it in that video. And then specific laws surrounding medical ethics. So it might be things such as HIV confidentiality law, it might be something such as the Mental Health Act, and when to use the Mental Health Act versus the Mental Capacity Act. So there's a few things there that will seem alien to you if this is your first time preparing yourself at all for medical school interviews, but hopefully after watching these video series, it will come as a kind of revision, I guess. So you should know it by then. The next type of MMI station is the situational judgment stations. Here, you need a structure again, and that's why I'm making a video about it, purely because I can pretty much teach you how to answer these stations properly, and you'll get all the marks and it will be a right answer to it. So a situational judgment one, a really popular one, is like you see a surgeon taking a swig of vodka before they go in to do a surgery. No one else says anything, what do you do? So we know the answer they're looking for here is to report that surgeon, but you can't just straight up just go report them. Firstly, it's unrealistic, it's not going to happen. 2, if you're a medical student at least, and 2, you need to be able to show what you would do in real life. And it might even be role play as well. So it might have kind of role play mixed in with it. It might say, this surgeon's just taken a swig of vodka, they're about to enter the theatre, please enact what you would do in real life. And then you have to do it then. So knowing the steps and what to do at each stage is really important, and I'll talk about that in a separate video, but make sure you watch that one because that might come up. It is quite a common station they like to ask. The next type of station is a graph interpretation station. So these are your data analysis and data interpretation stations, and they'll usually just give you a graph. It's mostly always a graph, or it could be a table, but basically some data interpretation where you have a graph or a table, and then they'll ask you a question and you have to read the graph or table and then answer the question they've asked you. It can seem simple, but sometimes they put a few things in there to catch you out. But it's a pretty simple type of station to get your head around. The next type of station is really rare. I've only seen it happen once or twice to some of my students, and I can't mention the medical schools that did them, so yeah, you're just going to have to spin the wheel on this one. I wouldn't spend a long time preparing for this. It's called a prioritization station. So in a prioritization station, they'll ask you to prioritize a series of options, and then they'll ask you why you prioritized in that order or at that priority level. So they might put 3 objects on the table and say you're about to go into the wilderness on a survival trip. Take one of these objects and explain why. So you not only have to explain the object you took, but you also have to explain the ones you didn't take. That's pretty much it to the prioritization stations. There might be a different context. There might not be a survival trip. You have to not only explain why you chose that option, you have to explain why you didn't choose the other options. And then you have to relate it to the context. And that's pretty much it. So yeah, I'm not going to make a video about that because that's really self-explanatory, and I'll just be wasting your time and my own time if I was to make a video about it. The next type of station, and I put this as a type of station because I just want to draw emphasis to it, I'm not going to make a specific video about it, is empathy. Now, empathy, you have to discern that from sympathy. Sympathy is feeling with, empathy is feeling for. So you can feel for someone, which won't drag you down that much. But if you feel with someone, that's going to burn you out as a doctor. So knowing the difference between empathy and sympathy can be really helpful. And this introduction video is kind of just giving you this kind of ammunition to use in your interview, where if you're talking about empathy, you can discern that from sympathy, which is feeling with, or something like that. You can check it. But yeah, it's making sure that you are displaying kindness and empathy to your patients and letting them go through what they're going through and being there for them as a doctor and also as a human being, but not burning yourself out in the process. And you have to display this at many different types of stations, from work experience to medical ethics to situational judgment to even the instruction giving stations, right? If someone is messing up on purpose so many times when you're telling them to pick up the yellow triangle Lego brick, they'll anger you, right? So you just need to keep calm and show empathy. They might get upset because they're not able to do what you're telling them, in which case you need to reassure them and calm them down and then get them ready to try again. So this kind of thing, they'll put nuances like that in your medical school interview, and you really need to just spot these. It's going to make all the difference in terms of the mark you get. So that's why I just wanted to draw a bit of attention to empathy as a concept and as a type of MMI station, because, you know, they might weave these all together. So yeah, I just wanted to draw some attention to it. The next type of MMI station are communication stations. Once again, I'm just drawing attention to this. I won't be making a specific video about communication, but it's just attention being drawn to communication because I want you to have an example in your work experience diary of a time where you showed good communication and a time where you might not have showed the best communication, and what did you learn from that? Just prepare those two answers. The next type of station is a PBL station. Now, if you're applying to a PBL medical school, I'm like 95% sure they'll have a PBL station or a mock PBL session, where you will be with a group of people, all of them also interviewing for medical school, and you're all doing a mock PBL about a scenario. Now, you don't need to know any academic knowledge for that. You don't need to know any medicine or anything, so don't go off trying to learn the kidney and the spleen. But they'll give you a scenario, and the scenario will be completely random. You just have to do PBL on that scenario. Now, in the video where I talk about the PBL station, we'll go into detail on what PBL is, what types of roles there are in a PBL group, and how you should do that type of mock PBL. Because the way you talk and the way you allow others to speak and initiate conversation, maybe spark some new ideas, all of these are going to be things that the interviewer will be seeing and will make you stand out in a good way in that group. You don't want to be the person who's trying the hardest, because then they're going to be like, oh, he's trying to take the limelight off others, and he's kind of a one-man show, which doesn't show good teamwork, you see? So it all comes hand in hand, which leads me on to my next type of station, which is teamwork stations. Now, teamwork stations, I am going to be making a separate video about, because there's so many questions they can ask you on teamwork, and there's so many different ways that you should answer them. But like I said in the beginning, the work experience diary is really your best friend. That is like your Bible for how to answer these types of questions. Prepare your answers accordingly. Now, throughout this video series, I'll go through all of the MMI stations, and I will leave no stone unturned in terms of what you need to know, right? Along the way, you're going to get so much benefit from this if you are proactive and if you make those answers prepared. So you prepare your answers in that work experience diary, in that table I showed you in the beginning. If you don't, there's not much I can do for you, right? I can't do the interview for you, but just prepare, otherwise you'll have to prepare to fail. So that's the introduction video over with. But just before you go, for anyone struggling mentally with interviews, because you've gotten through the UCAT or the BMAT and you're studying for A-levels at the same time, you're doing your extracurriculars at the same time, and you have the biggest exams of your life so far coming up, which is the A-level exams, and at the same time they're asking you to do medical school interviews where you need to do all this practice and all this prep. Please calm down, try and relax. I know it's easier for me to say because I'm not in your position right now, but I have been in your position and I know how it feels. I wish there was something like this when I was interviewing, where I could just start a YouTube playlist and write in a table, work experience diary, that table along the way, and be fully prepared for my interview. I wish there was something like this. And that is the motivation behind why I am doing this, is to give you guys the opportunity to just click on a YouTube playlist and have everything taught to you from beginning to end. So try and rest assured there will be no information that I have left out on purpose. I'm not leaving any information out so you pay me money and then I'll tell you it. That's not happening. The only thing you would ever pay me money for at this point is for me to do a mock interview with you, one-on-one. Other than that, you don't need me after this video series. You can do all of these videos in the video series and prepare on your own and then go in and try and smash it. And I'm sure you would smash it as well. So try and relax. We got this. And if you ever need anything, just send us a message and we'll be happy to hear you out. But don't worry, I've got you. Now let's get started.